All right, let's dive into something pretty interesting today. Math with a mission. We're going to explore a pretty fascinating question. How do you make sixth grade math feel like it has, well, a higher purpose? We're going to break down a curriculum that tries to do exactly that by mashing up ancient stories with modern math.
So, yeah, what do ancient stories and algebra have in common? I know, it sounds like the beginning of a really weird joke, right? But believe it or not, according to this very unique lesson plan, the answer is a whole lot. So let's see how this curriculum uses these old narratives to teach some core math concepts.
Okay, so the whole thing is built around what the curriculum calls the big idea. And the goal is pretty simple, really. It's to stop thinking about math as just, abstract numbers on a page. Instead, it's about seeing it as a tool to understand a much grander plan. We're talking about taking something like percentages and giving them a real, genuine purpose.
First things first, let's get the basics down. Just to make sure we're all on the same page, the lesson starts with a super simple definition. A percent, it's just how many parts you have out of 100. That's it. Simple enough.
And right away, this is where it gets interesting. The curriculum doesn't just leave it there. It connects that basic definition to real-world stuff, like budgeting, saving money, planning for the future. And to make it stick, it uses leaders from the Bible as these prime examples of people who were amazing planners, who really got how important it was to manage resources.
So how does this actually play out in a classroom? Well, the lesson dives into a really specific case study to make it all come alive. The story of Joseph and how he managed that massive grain harvest in ancient Egypt.
So here's the word problem they give the students. It goes like this. Joseph has collected 600 sacks of grain, but, and this is the key part, that's only 30% of the entire harvest. So the big question is, can you figure out what the total number of sacks was?
And the way to solve it is actually a pretty clean two-step process. First, you just turn that sentence into a math equation. 600 equals 0.30 multiplied by the total. Then, for step 2, you just have to solve for the total. You work backwards, dividing the part you have, the 600, by the percentage, 0.30.
You run the numbers and boom. The answer pops out. The total harvest was 2,000 sacks of grain. It's a really neat, straightforward solution that comes right out of that ancient story.
And when you see it visually like this, it just clicks. It makes the whole thing crystal clear. You're not just hearing the numbers anymore. You can actually see that 30% Joseph collected compared to the 70% that was still out there. It takes this abstract math problem and makes it something you can grasp in a second.
All right, but to make sure this concept really sinks in, the lesson doesn't just stop there. It gets the students to practice. They take the exact same math principle and apply it over and over again to a bunch of other biblical stories.
And this is where the repetition really helps. The students get a whole new set of problems with different characters. We're talking David and his taxes, Nehemiah building his wall, Esther and her earnings. So the story, the context, it all changes. But the math? It's exactly the same. Same formula, different narrative. And what's cool is when you look at all the answers, you see this amazing consistency. It doesn't matter if you're talking about gold coins, or meters of a wall, or even a number of people. The math, the logic, it always works. Every single time you can figure out the big picture, the whole, just by knowing one little piece.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? What's the point of this whole approach? Well, it's that this isn't just a math lesson. It's designed from the ground up to be math with a message baked right in. And to really hammer that message home, the lesson pulls in a verse from Colossians. It basically connects the hard work you need to do to solve a math problem with this bigger spiritual idea. The point is to frame that effort, even in math class, as something more, like an act of devotion, a way to strive for excellence. So when you boil it all down, the real goal here is to draw this powerful parallel. Think about it. Just like those 600 sacks are just one part of a giant 2,000 sack harvest, the lesson is trying to say that our own little efforts are also just small parts of a much, much bigger picture. It's connecting a math concept to a whole philosophy on life.
And that kind of leaves us with one last big question to think about, doesn't it? This curriculum is such a great example of how the what of education, the stories you use, the examples you pick, it does more than just teach a skill, it actually helps shape a worldview. Which really makes you wonder, how does what we learn end up fundamentally changing how we see the world?